Hi, welcome to this episode of The Daily. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, the early reviews for the new Ghostbusters film are starting to roll in now, and there are some consistent things that are coming from those reviews. Number one, apparently the movie is funnier than the trailers lead you to believe that it's actually going to be, so that's a positive. However, there are some consistent problems that I'm hearing and reading from different reviewers that really are quite serious and that detract from the fact that it is, even though it's funnier than what you expect, there's still these big problems with it. And I thought this would be an ideal time to do an episode today and respond to a question that a couple of people have been asking me. They said, okay, look, you've reviewed and you've talked about Ghostbusters a couple of times now, so tell us then, Mr. Know-It-All, how would you fix Ghostbusters? How would you actually make this movie better? Well, I'm glad you asked. Buckle up and join me on today's ride, because what we're going to do is I'm going to explain to you how I would fix Ghostbusters, and hopefully by the end of it you'll agree with me that this would be a far better movie, and this would be the movie that we would all actually want to see. So my repair of Ghostbusters starts like this. First of all, there is not going to be any Paul Feig, I don't mind how you pronounce his name, but Paul Feig is not going to be involved in this film. The first thing would be that you'd have a director who has either an 80s background or an 80s sensibility, and who is good with action comedy. Okay, that's what you need. Paul Feig does not fit the bill as the suitable director for this film, so I wouldn't have him involved. Instead, I would consider someone like Ivan Reitman, obviously he was involved with the originals, maybe even Robert Zemeckis, or in the newer stable of directors, someone like Edgar Wright or a Simon Pegg, or a Matthew Vaughn, someone who knows how to direct action comedy and who has an 80s sensibility and can work well with practical effects, which I think is going to be quite essential to making this a good film. Next thing is, this would not be a reboot in some reimagined universe, and it wouldn't be a prequel. The original Ghostbusters franchise is so good. It's like Star Wars. It actually deserves a proper sequel. It deserves that sort of respect. Rebooting a franchise, I think, is something you do when you either can't carry on with the sequel. In this case, you can. You've got enough of the original property available to you, the original actors, etc., to actually make a good sequel. But if you can't do that, you reboot it. Or if the original property was just not that good, that's when you do a reboot. Prequels, I don't think you do a prequel in this case, because the story actually starts with Ghostbusters. Doing a prequel I don't think it could work, because there's not really much to play with that you want to know about that happened before the original Ghostbusters film. So I think it's a sequel. And here's what I would do. I would set it in the future, where after the events of the 1980s, the government has now created a new law enforcement agency called the FBI, the Federal Paranormal Investigations. And what they do is they do what the old Ghostbusters used to do. So they've professionalized it, they've standardized it, they don't use proton packs anymore, they use these new devices. It's riddled with bureaucracy now. They're not paying as much care and attention to the actual process and investigations as they should be. And they have set up this headquarters in America, and they have this building where they've created a portal. And in that portal, they store all of the paranormal entities that they capture. And there are millions of these paranormal entities now stored in this portal. The original Ghostbusters they've got old. They are no longer given the respect that they're due. People don't realise how important their actual involvement was in the founding of the FBI and what actually kicked all this sort of stuff off. So they're not shown proper respect. They are barely even talked about or known anymore. They're sort of considered like a bit of a joke. So they've just disbanded and gone their separate ways. And they're just living quiet, sort of meandering sort of lives where they sort of perhaps, like someone like a Bill Murray is still trying to make it big, but he's just stuck in this sort of no man's land where no one really wants to know about him, and he's not taken seriously. And so they've all just disbanded, they've gone their separate ways, and they're doing pretty mundane, ordinary tasks, living mundane, ordinary lives, with the odd reminiscence about, the life they used to have when they were at the pinnacle of their fame as the Ghostbusters. And what happens is Egon Spengler dies. So this is where you pay tribute to Harold Ramis, and they are all forced to come back together from maybe even from other parts of the globe, but they come back together for Egon's funeral. and to obviously to wrap up his estate. Now, Egon still held out hope for the Ghostbusters. He's the only one who still held the original vision and the original dream for the Ghostbusters, and he believed and hoped against hope that one day they would come back together, because he still believed there was a need for them. And so that means that Egon still has the original building that they occupied. He kept all the proton packs and the other gear. He has got the original vehicle. It's all there in storage. It's all part of his estate. Now, while they are there for his funeral, they meet Egon's niece. Now, Egon's niece is played by Kristen Wiig. She's one of 2 cast members from this new movie that I would keep. And Kristen Wiig would be there. She is Egon's niece. She is a scientist. She looked up to her uncle. She absolutely adored him. And he trained her to be a Ghostbuster, because basically what happened was this: Egon, before he died, was actually carrying on with this paranormal investigation work that you see in the original film, and he came to the conclusion there was a lot of evidence that there was a major problem with the FBI and the way they were conducting and capturing ghosts. And basically this portal with millions of ghosts in it, he believes there's evidence that this leaves the world vulnerable to a major paranormal cataclysm. And so he believes he has to train and build a legacy so that that if this happens, there will be people to actually save the world. And so he's trained his niece, and Kristen Wiig tells the older Ghostbusters after the funeral that her uncle, his dying wish was that he desperately wanted the other Ghostbusters to come back together and to form a unit and to be available, and also to train new recruits. Now, the other Ghostbusters, they don't want a bar of this. They think it's unnecessary. They just don't want a bar of it, okay? But sure enough, while they're all together, settling up and reminiscing and looking over all the old gear and talking about the good old days, a global apocalyptic cataclysm that Egon had been fearing actually happens. And what it is this: a terrorist organization realizes that if they go into the FBI headquarters and blow themselves up, not only will they destroy all the FBI agents who can protect the world from paranormal threats, and not only will they release millions and millions of paranormal entities all at once who are really angry about being locked up on the world, but if they chant a certain incantation, they will also return as paranormal entities themselves now that they're dead, and they will have power over this army, and they will command an apocalyptic army that will bring about the end of the world. And so that happens. And there's no more agents to deal with this issue, apart from one agent. And that one agent is the other actor that I would keep from this new movie, and that is Kate McKinnon. And she's an agent, but she's kind of like the Fox Mulder of the FBI. They put her out on the fringes because she is old school, old style. She's a scientist. She's an absolute nerdy fangirl of the original Ghostbusters, and so they treat her as a pariah, and she was put away in some basement building away from their main headquarters, and that's why she survived. And so basically she ends up becoming part of, along with Kristen Wiig, the new Ghostbusters basically, and she's the only one left, along with the old Ghostbusters and Kristen Wiig, who can actually fight this apocalyptic army and save the world. The other Ghostbusters are convinced, perhaps they're watching some old Egon Spengler tapes or something where he lays out his dying wishes, and they realise they've got to do something. And so they come back together and form this Ghostbusters unit and go and save the day. Now here's the thing. The older original Ghostbusters, the 3 of them, have to sacrifice themselves at the end to save the world. And so they do that. They give their lives. They sacrifice their lives in order to defeat the bad guys and to save the world. And I imagine this scene where they all enter into heaven, and Egon's there waiting for them, and they've sacrificed themselves, and they've done this good thing, and they find themselves in heaven, and Egon is making some joke when they get there about, he's like this excited little schoolboy, basically, like we remember from the first film, and he is saying to them, hey, look, this is awesome, there's so much paranormal stuff we can investigate here, you guys are going to love it, and it sort of cuts away. Now, the final part of the movie, basically, the very final dying moments of the film, we now have Kristen Wiig and Kate McKinnon left. They're the only 2 Ghostbusters left. And what they are doing is they are now poring over applications. Lots of other scientists and individuals have applied to become part of the Ghostbusters again, this new reinvigorated Ghostbusters, because people realise they actually need the Ghostbusters, and they need these sort of old school methods to actually keep the world safe. And so what happens is the film rolls to credits, literally with this final scene where they have chosen 2 applicants to be the new Ghostbusters, and we see their applications. They've got photos on them, and the 2 applicants are Donald Glover from Community. You might remember Donald Glover from Community. And Paul Rudd. And so now we've got the new Ghostbusters set up. We have got a film that pays homage to the original property and shows, I think, great respect to the original Ghostbusters, and that gives it something worthy, a sequel that is really worthy of that original property. You have also rebooted this franchise, which was one of the desires of the studio, and you have set in place now everything you need to build a really good legacy, just like the Star Wars movie has done, has built all the foundations for a new legacy, and at least maybe one more or a couple more Ghostbusters films that are going to be really good and that are going to have a new generation of Ghostbusters. And you've done it in a way that satisfies all of those things and doesn't create any of the current problems. So effectively what you're left with is Donald Glover is the new Ernie Hudson, Kirsten Wiig becomes the new Egon, Kate McKinnon becomes the new Dan Aykroyd, and Paul Rudd is your new Bill Murray. And you've now got everything there. This is a recipe for success. This is how you make and remake or create a new Ghostbusters sequel that I think satisfies all of those issues. And then going forward, you make sure that whatever movies come next, they are in the hands of really good writers who understand practical effects, and directors as well, who know action comedy, who can write action comedy well, and who have a strong 80s sensibility. And if you do that, that would have been how you actually reboot and fix the problems with Ghostbusters. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily.